Good afternoon, everyone. Greenworks Trust welcomes you to this online session. Greenworks Trust is a Mumbai-based organization working for nature conservation, and we strongly believe that education and awareness is very important for conservation. So, during this lockdown time, we bring to you these informative sessions about various topics. Our today's topic is mesmerizing amphibians and reptiles of India, and we have Dr. Varat Giri on our board to talk on this. Dr. Giri has done his PhD from North Orissa University. Then, from research assistant to deputy director, he has worked in Bombay Natural History Society for 13 years. He has also worked in National Center for Biological Studies, Bangalore, for 4 years. In his research journey, Dr. Giri has described 56 new species of various. Hello, my voice is audible.
Yes, it is now. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll introduce Dr. Varat Giri once again. Hello, hello.
Yeah, it's all.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can hear you.
Okay. So Dr. Varat Giri has done his PhD from North Orissa University, and from research assistant to deputy director, he has worked in Bombay Natural History Society for 13 years. He has also worked in National Center for Biological Studies, Bangalore, for 4 years. In his research journey, he has described 56 new species of various reptiles and amphibians. Also, there are four species of reptiles which are named after him. But above all this, Dr. Giri is more inclined toward awareness about reptiles and amphibians rather than the research. So now I request Dr. Varat Giri to please continue the session.
Thank you very much, Sarvesh, for this short and brief introduction. It was quite impressive. uh, Rather than spending time on unnecessary things talking about the presenter is not good. People are not here to listen to that. We are here to listen to the main subject. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, sir.
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
Am I? Yeah, thank you. So this is uh, this is a topic which is very close to my heart. I like amphibians and reptiles, and there are various reasons for that. Uh, and one of the core reason why I like them is, they are mesmerizing. Their world is mesmerizing, and actually this is one of my efforts, to talk about them and to let you also know like what is so mesmerizing about them. So this is a small efforts to talk about the group of vertebrates which are, hated from the core of our heart. When you talk about animals, we have different diversity there. I'm not going to those details, but amphibians, reptiles never carried charisma with them. I don't feel that anybody, very few people really like them, and quite a lot of people, uh, they hate them. And to try to look at the reasons behind this, I think one of the biggest reason is lack of awareness. I don't feel bad about it, because if somebody feels something bad about something, that is their personal perception. But that perception is derived from their understanding. Okay, so talking about amphibians and reptiles in India, we do have stories and not the facts. There are so many myths, but very few realities. And all those things, if you put them together, I think that leads to hatred towards the group. So, what is the best way to get rid of that particular hatred? Just talk about them. Talk about them in a sense which everybody can understand. Talk about the sense in a way that people will start looking at them in a different perspective. And I'm thankful to Greenwork Trust for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to interact with a learned group here. So I'm not going to going to argue with a lot of scientific jargons and all. Just no, let's consider this as one of the interesting happening. Okay, so let's see what is mesmerizing. No? What do you mean by mesmerizing? See, I thought of giving a very wonderful talk, a popular talk, where I wanted to include very, very cool things with that. And then I was searching for a word for amphibians, and there are so many words came to my mind, and the word which struck me was mesmerizing. Okay, and I belong to a small village in Karnataka, and my mother tongue is Marathi. I learned everything in Marathi. So the word was amazing, mesmerizing. But what does that mean? I'm not aware of it. So I decided, no, so let's give a thought to that. And then, no, I started searching for the meaning of what is the meaning of mesmerizing. Let's start with the meaning of mesmerizing and then bring in amphibians and reptiles to that particular thing. Okay, so when I started for the meaning, I got quite a lot of synonyms for that, and it goes on like hypnotized, fascinated, spellbound, all that thing, transfixed. What is mesmerizing is all this. Okay, in simple words, this is what is mesmerizing. You meet someone and you can't take your eyes off. No. It stuck to you. It goes into you. It goes into your brain. It goes into your body. It goes into your blood. It goes into your DNA. And after that, every moment you spend with that particular thing, it goes into every aspect of your life. It goes into whatever you do, whatever you think, whatever you act, and that's what I feel that is mesmerizing. Anything which is mesmerizing, that takes you. And I feel that this is something really very, very important. You get connected with that. It becomes a part and parcel of your life. And there is an interesting God which keeps you, bonded with that particular thing. Mesmerizing something really cool. We all are mesmerized by it. Am I creating a mistake by asking this question? No, because I think we are. So and again, I'm going to ask you a simple thing. Look at the people here, and I'm sure we know each and every one of them. We know everything about them. Literally, means technically, we know quite a lot of things about them. So because they are so important and integral part of our life that we tend to understand, we tend to know about them. That's something very, very important. And that's why, that's where that mesmerizing thing comes. What mesmerizes them, and then you started understanding that. See, anything which we like, we try to gain as much knowledge as possible, as much understanding as possible. And I think these are the people who are like that. So I have a very small question. We do got mesmerized by them. We know everything about them. We are like, we have every knowledge about them. My second question: do they have any influence on my life? No. Do they provide me anything which can help me to survive? Today there is a corona happening. So, can I see a superhero coming and removing all the coronavirus and making a very comfortable life for us? Suppose I'm very hungry. I need food and I'm not getting the food. Am I getting some heroines are coming and giving that food to me? Are they providing me the oxygen? They are just giving us the entertainment. Okay. And for that, we're paying for it. Is it a free entertainment? No. So why I'm asking this question? Because we got mesmerized by them. We know everything about them, and we just get entertainment and nothing more than that. And for that also we pay. So let's continue with this. Fortunately, many of us are mesmerized. I do agree with that. The people who are sitting here, I think many of us are mesmerized by them. My second question: how many of us really know what they are? How many of us really know what are their role, what they are doing, what is their status, when are they breeding, when are they, what is their habitat preference, everything. Do we have any information about them? No. We do get mesmerized, we get fascinated by that, but we really don't have any information about them. My second question, like earlier I asked, like, who give us the food? I think the plants give us the food. They are the primary producer. Without plants, we can't survive. Who give us oxygen? plants give us the oxygen. Without them, without that, we can't survive. If there are no birds, what will happen? I think the entire biodiversity will collapse. If there are no honeybees, what will happen? Entire biodiversity will collapse. And when I say entire biodiversity will collapse, there are the humans in that. Where is me in that? I will not be there. No? So my soul existence, my soul, whatever is there is directly dependent on them. So for me, they are really very, very important. That's what I wanted to tell you. No? They have tremendous influence in my life. No, I can survive without Amir Khan and Shah Rukh Khan, but I can't survive without a plant or a honeybee. No, that's where I'm coming. Okay. I can't survive without it. That's what I want to tell you. Okay. So let's take a step further. Let's take a step ahead and let's start thinking. Now, how many of you are really mesmerized by nature? And I'm sure the answer is who all are sitting here. We all are mesmerized by nature. No, we really are mesmerized by nature. Nature is, we love it. And I really appreciate and agree with you all. Okay. So let's check what is the origin. I think there is some mic on and I'm getting the.
We'll check and resolve the problem. You please continue, sir.
Okay, because that is quite a lot of distance. Somebody is cleaning their utensils. Okay, anyway, sorry. So let's check. What is the origin of our love for nature? So from where that love is getting originated. So don't take it personally. I'm just trying to tell you that we all love nature, but what is that origin? Let's try to find that. My question: how many of you really like the birds? I'm sure everyone here likes the birds. Birds are very important because they are beautiful, they're amazing, they're mesmerizing. So we love them. My next question: how many of us really love growth? No, I'm sure the answer is no. There will not be many people who really love it. Okay. And my question is very, very precise. I asked the question like, how many of us love the growth? Okay. So when I think many people are answering that I love them. Okay. My next question now, they really love them. So can you use this as a proxy to describe the people whom you love? Can you love your boyfriend or a girlfriend saying that you look like a crow? No, no, we can't. Because I think if you do that, your boyfriend will leave you or your girlfriend will leave you. Because crow is not an animal to be loved. But see, again, the problem is they really don't look beautiful. No, and here I'm talking about the aesthetic sense. Many people who love the nature, they are connected with nature because of the aesthetics behind it. So let's see again, don't take it personally. That's what I'm trying to tell. Yeah. And how can I say that confidently? Because look at the people who are working on birds and the number of people who are working on insects. You see the difference. I think you will get the difference there. Now, see, the main difference is if I love something, I try to understand it more. I try to go ahead and try to get more knowledge, more information about it, and try to do something for it. I think there are 1,300 species of birds in India, and I'm sure not less than 13,000 bird experts or bird researchers or bird watchers in India. And there are thousands of species of amphibians and reptiles in India, and thousands of species of insects. But how many people are studying them? How many people are really understanding them? Forget about butterflies. Butterfly is a different group, but they're beautiful. But so people equally love moths. I don't feel so. No, again, see, that's what I'm saying that my love for nature is governed by aesthetic values. And if that is the case, then I'm not a real nature lover. I should be loving each and every aspect of biodiversity because they are there. That's why I'm here. Honeybee is important because if she doesn't work, I'm not going to leave. I'm going to die. She's providing food to me. She's creating the basic formation of seed is done by the efforts of honeybees and those things. They're important to me. That's what I'm saying. Like every aspect of biodiversity is important. And as a real nature lover, I feel that we should be loving every aspect of biodiversity. Every aspect of biodiversity. The moment you start respecting ants and tigers equally, believe me, you have achieved the nirvana of biodiversity, nirvana of nature. And believe me, after that, every moment of your life is a wonderful journey, mesmerizing journey, because you started appreciating each and every aspect of biodiversity. But you started appreciating every aspect of biodiversity means their contributions for ourselves. And the moment you go there, I think you become one with nature, then nothing steals your happiness. Okay, now that was one of the basic philosophies for me to love amphibians and reptiles. Hence, I was mesmerized by amphibians and reptiles. Don't look at the picture, look at the snake there. I was mesmerized by that snake. Okay, so this is the group which I really like. No, these are not the photographs from India. The two lizards here are from India. This is from somewhere else. But look at the diversity. There is tremendous diversity of colors, tremendous diversity of patterns, everything. And look at them. They have everything what you need. No, they are beautiful. You know, there is a famous saying. It says, beauty lies in the eyes of beholder. If the beauty lies in the eyes of beholder, then there is a problem with the beholder, not with that beauty. That is my perception. That is not the perception. That is not that animal is responsible for that. That is me who is a problem, not that animal. That's where I'm saying, if you really like them, I think please break that barrier. Go ahead and start appreciating every aspect of biodiversity. And that's where probably you become the real nature lover. Okay. They really mesmerize me. Amphibians and reptiles are wonderful. Okay. And let's see why, why they mesmerize me. So let's peek into the history of India. Let's look at how India formed, and then I will come to amphibians and reptiles with that. Because see, this biodiversity is formed not easily. There are so many events which shape what biodiversity we know. I'm talking about amphibians and reptiles, but this amphibian reptile is not living in isolation. It lived in company with there are all the other things as well. So how does this happen? Let's have a look at it. So I think let's talk about India as a viewer. So it is a big journey which started from Africa, and then that particular landmass got attached with Asia, and there are many events which happened, and those events shape what India is today. And look at the age; it takes quite a lot of time. What India today? It's not easy. When you go into this, when you try to understand how does this happen, I think we start appreciating India in a different perspective. The moment you understand, whoa, this is what happened. That's why. Like the moment I stand somewhere, I start looking at these events. The moment I see a tree, I feel that, oh, this tree was from Africa. Here now. Means it has seen many things then. So that starts your bonding with nature in a different way. Start appreciating each and every aspect. That's what I'm saying. No. So these are the events I'm just trying to talk about. So this is something around 200 million years ago. This was the situation. I think we all know. No, and then by around 166 million years ago, this thing started. Okay. By 85 million years ago, India got separated from Madagascar. Okay, I'm not telling this with it is not a story. There is a science behind it. There are people who studied that, and there are multiple papers which proved these events. There are so many things which prove what I'm saying here. This is not again coming from my things. Okay. So, when India started its journey from Africa, this entire landmass you see here, this entire landmass was wet evergreen forest. See, there are two important things here. Look at this. This is equator, and you know that entire biodiversity is concentrated across the equator, because that is the place where everything is. All the suitable things for for flourishing the biodiversity are there. That's why you get rich diversity there. And as you go towards north and south, I think the biodiversity decreases. So we, as the landmass, we cross that particular very interesting line. And when we are heading up by around 65 million years ago, there was a Deccan Trap volcanism event. And I think that event happened for maybe 3 to 4 million years. Imagine, half of the India was burning for 3 million years. What does that mean? That means the biodiversity at that point and at that place got finished, got extinct, got burned. Everything, nothing was there. Means half of the India was the charcoal at that particular point of time, a burning rock, molten lava at that particular point of time. Means of nothing. But today we have too many things. So when we started moving up, there are various hypotheses which says that when India was moving up, it was brushing very close to Sunda Islands and all those things, and then many species from those particular landscape came into India. They went out of India from there, and there are one hypothesis which says that India was moving close to Africa. So all these things are there, and we can see these signals. If you go to northeastern part of India, much of the elements you get there, faunal elements you get there, they are Indo-Chinese. What we get in Western Ghats is mostly endemic, or it has affinities with Africa. Go to northwestern part of India, I think you get all the Middle Eastern elements coming. Something makes India an amazing place. No? India got attached to Asia, Himalayas formed, and that wet evergreen forest got converted into 10 biogeographic zones. This is what is India. This is what our biodiversity is made up of. This is how our biodiversity got so enriched. There are so many things which happened. 166 million years ago, a wet evergreen forest, and today there are 10 biogeographic zones, and every biogeographic zone has its own biodiversity. No, it has a different kind of diversity there. When it comes to amphibians and reptiles, they are there in every aspect of India now. They are there in desert, they are there in highlands, they are there in the Western Ghats, they are there in Himalayas and everywhere. No, so this is what a faunal diversity. I'm not believing. I think these are the old figures. Don't take it on a face value. I think these numbers are changed and changing. But look at that. No, it has quite a lot of things. And this is about vertebrate diversity. Look at the central pie chart. It shows that 27 to 28% of known amphibians are critically endangered. What does that mean? That is not a good thing. So this is what about the faunal diversity. Let's talk about amphibians and reptiles. No, the group which I'm going to discuss. So the herpetofaunal diversity is rich and poorly documented. If you talk about Indian herpetology, I think diversity is really rich. There are about 1,000 different species of amphibians and reptiles are there, and it is poorly documented. What is the basis for my statement to say it is poorly documented? Check, today there are 3 new species of lizards been described from India. What does that indicate? That indicate the diversity, what we know, is not the real diversity. There are many things which are not yet known to science, means the diversity is poorly documented. Okay. Think of the herpetofaunal studies in India. So I think they have seen a progressive change. So they started with something, and today they are at a very interesting juncture, and I'm sure there is a promising future. I'm going to show you all those things as well. Okay, and this is the best model to study the biodiversity assessment. So if you want to do a biodiversity assessment, a presence of amphibian or a particular reptile tells you the quality of the habitat. That is the case. I think these are the best models to understand this habitat is good or bad. Okay, what are the challenges? So to talk about the challenge, I feel that they are the opportunities. First, how many species are there in India? We don't know. No, today, if 3 species are getting added, there are many coming up. Do we really know the numbers? No, we don't know anything. Means we have the opportunity to document the diversity of amphibians and reptiles in India. The challenge is numbers we don't know. The opportunities, we have a job to perform. We have to answer these questions. Next. Do we have any information about habitats and the present status of the known amphibians in India? No, we don't have. Now, if anybody has any questions regarding my statement, please let me know. Because I'm saying it with the experience. We really don't know anything about any known amphibian and reptile. If I don't know what that animal eats, where does that animal live? No, what is happening with that animal, then how am I going to conserve them? Is it possible? If I don't have that knowledge, how am I going to conserve it? Look at the tiger, man. I think there are so many people studying tigers, and we have tremendous data for the tigers. And that data we are using for their conservation. Happening or not, I don't know. But we are using it. There is enough data. What about these 1,000 different species, amphibians and reptiles? We don't know. We really don't have that information. What is that? What is the opportunity? I think you go back, you want to study the habits and habitats of amphibians and reptiles. There are 1,000 PhD level work waiting for their attention. Present status, again, equal number of theses. Means if you decide that I want to look at certain things, I think you need maybe next 200 to 300 years to answer those questions. This much amount of information needed, which we don't have at this stage, means there is huge amount of opportunity to answer these problems. Third, conservation action. Have you ever heard of anybody coming up and saying that I want to conserve the frogs of India, or I want to conserve the house geckos of India? I think it may sound like a joke, but the well-being of tiger is directly related to the nice status of amphibians. They are doing well, I think tiger will also do well, because these are the foundations of biodiversity. These are the foundations of nature. If I remove the foundation, if the foundation is not on a strong basis, I think how the building will stand, how the tigers will get conserved. Think about this. Okay. Let's look at how this study evolved in India. Now, let's start from 1758, and today it is 1947. So 1758, why? Because that is the time when the biodiversity is, I think the people started documenting biodiversity in a real scientific way. That is the time Carl Linnaeus published his first paper, where he started using binomial nomenclature to describe the biodiversity. That's why I'm putting that as a landmark. Okay, so most of the known species today are described during this particular period. Means that was the era of new species. People described quite a lot of new species and very short and vague descriptions. So, like most of these descriptions are very short. They're mostly coloration. Okay. Interestingly, I'm not criticizing them. No, I'm not saying that they did a bad job. They did wonderful work. There are some amazing publications. I think we have not been able to read that until now. Forget about replicating that work. I don't feel that any Indians have a capacity to replicate the work done by these people. If you feel that I can do it, please let me know. I'll be more than happy. I will tell your name in my next talk that these are the people who are going to study the amphibians and reptiles of India, like the Europeans did in the past. I don't feel that we have that zeal, or we are not so much mesmerized to do and replicate that kind of work. Okay, so many of these localities are there. So what happened that time? Like for them, it's okay. They said like Malabar. What is Malabar today? I don't know. And so many species, they said that distribution is India. Now India is 10 different biogeographic zones. And why this is important today? Because see, there are many amphibians and reptiles which are endemic to a small range, and this information is not enough. We need very precise information. Okay, and interestingly, many of these descriptions were done by non-professionals. What I mean by non-professionals, I'll tell you. Then, and most of the descriptions are based on painting. Forget about that. That is not a big deal. No. And I think these are the people. This is one of the person who brought science to a different level. Is Carl Linnaeus. He is the father of modern taxonomy. He is the one who started binomial nomenclature, and he described many species of amphibians and reptiles from India, and these are the two representative species here. And this is Richard Beddoe. He described quite a lot of new species of amphibians and reptiles. And look at this. This is the description of a species called golden gecko. This golden gecko is endemic to India, described by Beddoe in 1870, and that description was in just one paragraph. Interestingly, many of these people are not professionals. So they had different jobs to do. Many were army officers, many were doctors, but they were mesmerized by amphibians and reptiles, and they contributed towards the documentation of amphibians and reptiles. If that would not have been done, I think we would be still struggling. This is the best book until today. The book is Fauna of British India. This book is written by Malcolm Smith. Malcolm Smith, I consider him as one of the potential contributors towards the taxonomy of reptiles. Book is still the Bible for many researchers, including me. I always say that if this book would not have been there, I think the Indian herpetology would have been in great mess. Indian reptiles would have been in great mess until today. So the amount of details the person has provided is humongous. Okay, let's talk about the next era that started in 1947 to 2000. Okay, that era was also equally dominated by anecdotal use. When I say anecdotal newspaper descriptions, I say that because people did not made an effort to do that work. Somebody went to do bird watching. They got a result and they described it. It was like that. Nobody went out only to look at lizards, only to do a study on animals. Nothing of that kind happened. Randomly got something and they described. Okay. Many bad descriptions as well. Somebody described a gecko which throws light. I'm not going to talk about it, but this is a bad thing. Just I would like to tell you that if you publish a wrong science, that blame goes to the country and not to the scientists. Whatever wrong you are doing. Now, today, science is an international commodity. The moment you publish something, it becomes international commodity in no time. And the moment I think people start reading it, and the moment they see that this is wrong, I think they start blaming the country. Please don't do wrong science. If you're doing it, do it properly. Otherwise, don't. Third, there are many good descriptions as well. Why to talk about bad things? Let's talk about good things. There are some amazing descriptions as well. Okay, and these are the people who are still working, but they worked in that particular era and they helped us. Okay, I'm not going to details of who are there. Okay, this is a book again published by ZSI, Zoological Survey of India. This book is Indian Lizards. And I will not say that this is one of the promising book because this is more like Fauna British India. Now, what does this mean? I think we need one more very good book like Fauna British India of Smith. Who is going to do that? This is Indranil Das. He is the one who, I always say that these are one of the first pioneers who brought Indian herpetology to a different level. So, see, in one of my earlier slides, I was showing you that the Redcomb's newspaper description was a one paragraph. Here, look at this. The abstract is one paragraph. This the paper went up 2 to 3 pages, 4 pages, because he added more detail, proper science. So many things happened. Means Indian herpetology started shading its skin, started metamorphosing. Okay. Then forget about the timing. 2015 is wrong. It is 2020. Okay. So this is the modern era now. And in this period, robust newspaper started coming. People started using good microscopes. They started looking at various new characters. They started analyzing those characters using that particular thing. They started collaborating with many scientists from India and abroad, and the species started very, very. See again how slowly the Indian herpetology is getting evolved. Okay, then people started doing integer sampling and taxonomy. Again, what do I mean by integer sampling? I'll give you one example. There's a scientist called Dr. Ishan Agarwal. So he did his PhD in Indian Institute of Science, and he did his PhD on 3 genera of lizards, geckos in India. He traveled for more than 50,000 kilometers across India only to look at the 3 different lizards, nothing else. This is what I mean. This is sampling. He used multiple line of evidences to describe what is the normal space. So I think that this is something really cool. Means anecdotal newspaper descriptions got converted into professional efforts. So these are the efforts which these people are putting in, and I'm really happy that that's what I mentioned. Indian herpetology, metamorphosis. Now this is the time when people started using phylogeny. Phylogeny is using DNA to understand the taxonomy. People started using biogeography. So biogeography tells us why a particular species is here, why a species is endemic to Western Ghats, why it is a widely distributed species. All these questions are answered by a science called biogeography. And I told you the journey of India from Africa to Asia is biogeography, and the events associated with that is a biogeography. There are many papers got published in this particular era targeting this subject. Okay, and these are the people now who are helping us enrich our understanding of amphibians and reptiles. Number is less, but their efforts are amazing. They are putting in tremendous efforts. I know the hardships these people are facing. Many of these people are jobless, but they're not living herpetology. Many of these people got the job now. They have different things to do, but they're still doing herpetology. I think that's where the passion, that's where the intention, that's where the things these people are carrying. And it is only because they got mesmerized by happiness. No? And look at this. There are two girls as well. The girl here in the corner is Aparna Lajmi. She did a degree on House Gecko. The girl here with the torch is Chun Kamai. She is the one, she studied the amphibians in northeastern part of India. Look at this. These are the young people who are shaping our and enriching our understanding about it. Okay. Now, the question: what are the things which will mesmerize you in Indian herpetology? No, let's look at certain aspects of Indian herpetology which will mesmerize you if you want to do it. No, let's start with the taxonomy. As I told you, taxonomy is the science of naming the species, and naming is the beginning of conservation. Naming is beginning of science. Naming is beginning of everything. Proper name can lead to this. Imagine if the tiger would not have been described, how many papers would not have been published, how many conservationists would not have been alive today. They would not have been in picture. So tiger is there, that's why we all know them. Tigers are there. Somebody made an effort to describe a cat with stripes as tiger, and after that everything started. Unfortunately, we forgot the person who did that. We forgot the person who laid that foundation, and today we are happy with the people who are cashing on that particular thing. Okay, taxonomy is really important. People who do taxonomy, they are the ones who lay the foundation for everything. Please don't disrespect. Okay, so I'll give you one example. How taxonomy helps us. There are many taxonomic ambiguities. What happens? Somebody sitting in America, they said these two lizards are one. Okay, one is from Pakistan and another is from India. And in Maharashtra, they said that both are one. So I had a doubt. So I started looking at it, and I found out that no, that is wrong. And we proved that no, it is something else. After that, we continued that study, and we published a paper. And we looked at the distribution of this lizard. This lizard is endemic to small rocky outcrops in the coastal areas of Ratnagiri and Sindhudurg district in Maharashtra, and are having severe threat. Believe me, all this information led to the conclusion that this is a critically endangered species. Now, the species is considered as critically endangered by IUCN. Don't you feel that a taxonomy has led to these discoveries? If that would not have been done properly, I think this species would have facing something else. Now, we can use this species to conserve that landscape, but this is a critically endangered. Coming back to taxonomic species complex, ambiguity basically. So there is one lizard called Hemidactylus brooki. This lizard is mentioned in all the checklists in India. So in 2016, Aparna Lajmi, the girl I showed, he published a paper which proves that there is no Hemidactylus brooki in India. That species is not there, which has been talked about in India everywhere. That species is composed of around 10 to 12 different species again, and all those are endemic to India. See, now the entire picture will change, things will change, and we can do wonders. So people started new species description. There is undescribed species diversity there. We have to describe that. See, we have multiple reasons to get mesmerized. Taxonomy, the moment you describe a new species, you become immortal. Give me one reason by which you can become immortal. I think you can do a wonderful job. People may remember you for 50 years, 60 years, maybe 100 years. After that, nobody. But I gave an example of Carl Linnaeus, who published his work in 1758. Means he's still alive, and until the science is alive, he will be alive. If you want to get immortality like that, so publish a new species. I think you will become immortal. And amphibians and reptiles will give you that opportunity. I think there are multiple reasons to get mesmerized. This is one of them. There are many new species still need to be discovered. And only a handful of people who are trying to do that. We need more people. We need more people like you to take up this work to a different level again. So this is another paper where the pan-throated lizards were described. Okay, look at this. This is something very interesting example. It's a snake called Castor's coral snake. The paper got published in 2012. Look at the name of second author. That is Ogle. Ogle is Hemant Ogle. Hemant Ogle is a person who runs a resort in Amboli, who is a mechanical engineer, and he is the author of this news description. He described this news. I'm giving this example because if you have a doubt saying that, hey, I do want to do research, but I can't, no, because I don't have the background, remove that bias from your brain. To decide, you can do it. This is the best example. Phylogeny. See, again, I think there are many people, many students here probably listening to me in their colleges, in their universities. Whenever I go, people talk about, hey, what are you doing? I'm doing DNA barcoding. Nobody knows what does that mean. What is barcoding? Nothing. Barcoding is the end product. That science is phylogeny. When you use DNA, it's phylogeny. And what you do with phylogeny, you can do wonderful things. You can do classification, you can identify pathogens, you can do forensics, bioinformatics, answering many biological questions, and you can do so many things with phylogeny. This is one best example. This is the first phylogeny, one of the first phylogenies of house echoes published in India. No? And there are many species for which the phylogeny is not yet been resolved. Don't you feel that this is mesmerizing? The phylogeny tells us their ancestry, their evolutionary history, their evolutionary trajectory. Then you will come to know, wow, this lizard is here because of these events. The closest relative of this lizard is in Africa. Means we have the African origin. Now, all these things, don't you feel that all these things are mesmerizing? Yes, they are. And we have. This is another very interesting story where Ishan Agarwal, I told you the example. So the moment he started looking at these lizards with a different perspective, he realized that there is huge amount of cryptic diversity. The lizards look alike, but they are not. They are different. Who is going to describe them? We have to do that now. This is the science which is dying. See, many of us may be going for bird watching. We go for bird watching with a checklist in the hand. We feel that this is the right way to do bird watching. We feel that this is how the bird watching is done. Tell me how much time you spend with that bird when you encounter. Nowadays, I was fortunate enough to go with some eminent birders and their group, and I was really shocked to see their behavior. They go with the checklist and they are interested in picking. And when they come back, all were discussing about how many species I saw. Does that mean that you are better than nature? Does that mean you are amazing than birds? Nobody talked about, wow, look at that bird. That bird is sitting there and doing this. It's something unique. I never saw a bird doing this before. Is this the time for them? They're breeding. Why this bird is flying at this particular level? Why it's not coming down? Really, we spend any time doing these activities? No. Because I have to come back and put it on Facebook and Instagram saying that today I went for birding and I saw 20 birds, 30 birds, 200 birds, 100 birds. How many birds you saw? That is not going to solve any purpose. But if you look at that bird carefully and write something about it, that is going to help that bird in long run. Your checklist is not going to help any way, but your proper notes about its behavior, about its presence, about its number, everything is going to help it. So talking about amphibians and reptiles, story is horrible. We really don't know anything about anything in these groups. Take the example of frogs. There are around 400 different groups of amphibians, species of amphibians in India. We hardly know the breeding behavior of 4 to 5 species. Don't you feel that this is bad, horrible, this is sad? No, why should we consider ourselves as part of the citizens of a country which is biodiversity rich? We are very proud that we belong to a country which is rich in biodiversity. Are we doing something to that? No, we are not doing anything. We are only clicking the photographs, uploading them on the Facebook, and getting the likes. Okay, I've seen photographs which got thousands and thousands of likes. I've seen people who have thousands of followers. Okay, does that solve any purpose? No. Do you know what you need for conservation? You need 10 followers in a village and 10 likes to your thoughts by those villagers to change the grassroots level conservation. 1,000 followers and 1,000 likes doesn't solve any purpose, but 10 people at grassroots level really matters a lot. That's what I mean to say. I think, and where will you get it? Work with them. Try to understand. Go there. Look at these animals, what they are doing. And I think this is where we have to get the help from local people as well. Next. This is one species. Again, why we need to get mesmerized? Because look at the breeding behavior of this frog. This frog, which is endemic to the Western Ghats, it's called Indirana. The genus is Indirana. Family Ranidae. It is endemic to the Western Ghats. Okay, and this frog don't lay their eggs in water. Their eggs are laid outside water. Their tadpoles are not aquatic. Tadpoles are terrestrial. So don't you feel that this is something really very interesting? This is really interesting. Many of the frogs about which we know the breeding, they all breed in a very unique way, and that's happening in Indian frogs. No frogs in the world breeds like this. This is something very cool. No, this is only known amphibian in India or in Asia, which gives birth to the young ones. See, this is another reason to get mesmerized by Indian amphibians. Okay, this is the breeding behavior of a common toad, not common toad, the toad which is endemic to Amboli. It's called Amboli toad or a tiger toad. They breed in a small little bit water, and they are critically endangered. If I don't know the breeding behavior of this frog, how I'm going to conserve it? And this breeding behavior is so unique that no other toads in the world are known to breed like this. There are many species for which we don't know anything. So let's start gathering that information. And this is something really mesmerizing. We have to take it. This is Nyctibatrachus, another very interesting frog, genus endemic to the Western Ghats. Okay, and these frogs also don't lay their eggs in water. See, many people must have gone to Amboli, and many people must have clicked the photograph of this frog with the vocal sac open and with the eggs there. How many people really thought, is my flash going to create any problem there? See, the male which is sitting here, he gets that position, it's called oviposition post, and he sits there and calls for a female, and he uses that post for months together. He sits there for months. He has his own domain, territory decided. The moment we go there and click, like in Amboli, I've seen people. One night I went to one street and I saw the frogs were there. Next day, this tourism business started, and after next 2 nights again, if I went there, many of the frogs were missing. What could have been the reason? One group containing of 10-15 people, every person takes around 5 to 6 photographs. See how many times we are flashing, how much disturbance we are creating. We are putting the light from behind, we are putting the light from above, we are putting the light through because we want a photograph. And what is the use of that photograph? That photograph will go on Facebook and I will get likes. What is happening to the frog? Nobody knows. This is where our love is leading. So I think we should be very careful about it. See, we should get mesmerized by them, but get connected with them, get attached with them. See what pain they are facing. Let's experience that pain. And the moment you get that, I think you start. At the end of the day, the amphibians and reptiles are hated by people because there's lack of awareness. Okay? So still there is Ichadari Nagina life. People still believe that the snake gets converted into Nagin. And people feel that if you get bitten by a snake, you die. You need a different level of suppose somebody, there must be many people sitting here. They may be interested in working with people, trying to tell something about amphibians and reptiles to people. I think you have a great job. You should get mesmerized by them. You should tell them that why snakes are important, how they are important. I did a course for the last 2 days now. Okay, last 2 days we did a course. I think there were some 70 people from across India who attended this course. I haven't shown a single snake. I did this course virtually by sitting here in my house, and everybody liked it. You don't need a snake to do awareness. If you decide, I think we can bring a positive change. I think, and get yourself mesmerized and start discussing about that with people and let them mesmerize. I think once we change their attitude, once people know that the lizards are not poisonous, they will start loving it. Once people know that a snake bite is not fatal, they will start protecting it. I think we need it. Okay. See, what is the need of the hour? The need of the hour is we need to tell people that lizards are handsome. Don't you feel that? Look at this lizard. So this is one of the handsome lizards in the world. You know why this is handsome lizard? Because this is Ceratodactylus varadgiri. Third, which is named after. Sorry, this is not a handsome or anything. I'm just trying to do it. Funny. Tell people that frogs are super. No, India is blessed with tremendous diversity of frogs, and they do tremendous things. No, we have frogs. We are amphibians living underground. We are amphibians living on the land. We are amphibians living in water. We are amphibians living on the trees, and we are amphibians which glide in the air as well. Don't you feel that this is really cool, really amazing? No, did anybody talk to you about frogs in this particular way? Can anybody say that frogs are super? Nobody, because they say, oh, frog, yeah, like that. No, don't do that. No, see, bring the change in you, and I'm sure you're going to change the entire world. Snakes are cool. Yes, snakes are cool. But in a different way. No, people start get the altruism comes with the snake. They start catching them. They start doing so many other things. That is not needed. No? We have to break that particular thing and go ahead and start understanding. No? Indian snakes are really, really amazing. No? Don't become a snake wrangler, because wrangling a snake is not science. Understanding them is a science. So, let's see. I told you, no, like all these things are there to get mesmerized. So I wish to give you some unique examples who got mesmerized by amphibians and reptiles of India and who contributed tremendously towards this field, who are still contributing, and they are people like you. Are not the researchers like you. See, I'm a researcher. So I work with BNHS, I work with NCPS. I got paid to do this job. I did nothing great because doing that science was my job. That was my bread and butter. Okay. These are the people who really did it. He's Ashok Captain. He's a cyclist. He just finished his graduation. Nothing else, but he is one of the prominent figures in Indian snakes. He is the one who brought taxonomy of snake to normal people, to common people like us. Before Ashok, taxonomy was confined to scientists. Ashok broke that barrier. He made it open. A person sitting here and talking to you, who is considered as one of the good figures in Indian herpetology, have got a lot of new species. Ashok could not have been there. I would not have been sitting here. No? He brought that science to me. I understood science because of him. Don't you feel that that is a contribution? Okay, you believe it or not, I believe it or not, leave it. There are people who really believed it, and there are 2 species of snakes named after him. So this is what is the real contribution. Cyclist, not associated with any organization, no education background of science, not a great scientist. Technically, he's not a PhD or anything, not a biologist, but he is an icon. He's more than that. So he may not have a PhD, but people can do PhD on his work. I think I talked about this mechanical engineer. I really appreciate it. Forget about the new species description of snake. That is one part he did, but he's the one who made tremendous contributions towards the butterflies in the Western Ghats. Look at his book. Don't you feel that these are the people who are really the heroes? These are the people who we need to appreciate their effort for their efforts. And they are doing this job selflessly. They are not doing popularization of their work to get their benefit, to get the benefit of it. They're just doing it because they are mesmerized by that science, that those groups, they're doing it. Akshay Khandekar. Now today, I think he's the author in that paper. Today, the 3 new species, Akshay is the author. So he's a student, just finished his MSc before 2 years, and today I think he's much better than me. I may have given him some basic training, but today he has taken Indian reptile studies to a different level. A student, very young student. These are the people. They are for me. They are the real heroes, and they are the heroes because they got mesmerized by amphibians and reptiles. R. Chaitanya, he's an IT professional. Look at this. These are the wide range of people. None of them has a sound background of science. But they are the ones who are changing the fate of science in India today, fate of Indian herpetology. These people are changing. They are doing it. Chaitanya is the best example again. IT professional. He started his career in 2014. At this stage, he has I think 20 or 21 years to describe. But you feel that this is something really cool. And at the end of the day, get this Babaji, who is okay, jokes up. See, many times we get mesmerized by them. We spend our entire life doing it. We feel happy in doing what we did, what we do. But we also get benefited by many other things. You know? See, I'm sitting here and talking to you about all these things, get mesmerized and Baba. Okay, but at the end of the day, you also get immortal. You know? Your contribution to nature always comes back. Nature is the only entity which remembers your contribution, and the nature gives back to you. Believe me, if you are contributing something, nature has the capacity to give it back. Nobody has the capacity to give. No? So it is like good karma. Do good karma, it comes back. No, do good karma for nature, it comes back. We have to do it because without them we can't survive. So this is a new species called Dendrolaphis. Another new species the name of this person. I can see, don't take it wrongly. I'm not trying to prove that I'm a great person. I'm not. I don't consider myself as a herpetologist. I'm still the student of herpetology. I'm still trying to understand these animals. I'm still trying to know what they are because without them I can't. And this is another lizard called Pterodactylus. I told you that that. So see again, what I mean to say here is, so if your contributions are genuine, things come to you. This is another. I think enough for this lifetime. I'm happy that there are so many things. Okay. I think many of us have seen the movie called no? Popularity के पीछे मत भागो, अच्छा काम करो, झक मार के आपके पीछे आती है. Do that, I think everything comes. Do good work, good science. People start appreciating. And science, amphibians and reptiles, has this power back to you because there are very few studies are happening, and there are very few people are there in this field. Means there is less competition, and there are too many things to do. Means we need more people. If you want everything, I think get mesmerized. Okay. So see, I got all those things, and apart from that, I also got amazing friends. Everything, man. Just to conclude, this is a golden era for Indian herpetology. Indian herpetology is at a very amazing juncture. As I told you, it started with news descriptions, and today there are too many studies happening in various aspects. People are looking at no, very few people are there, but they are doing it. There are people doing phylogeny, there are people doing biogeography, there are people doing taxonomy, there are people doing a little bit of conservation, there are people doing ecological studies as well, but we still need more people. No? And we are at a juncture where we need people. We have the expertise now, but we need people. No? Let's do something for them. See, how many of us go for bird watching? How many of you go for frog watch and lizard watch? No? There are many people who save snakes. They're really doing it or not. I'm not going into those details now, but why not other groups as well? No? Let's do something good. Basically, I think now I should get mesmerized. I should love them, but at the end of the day, my core value should be enriching their knowledge, enriching their scientific understanding. That's what is needed for their training. My personal love for anything is not going to solve the problem, but my papers are going to help in the conservation. That is something very, very important. No? Okay, awareness is something really, very important. The more awareness, more people will come. Tell people that frogs are amazing, snakes are amazing, lizards are amazing. Many people will come, and I think we'll get good people to continue this. Or get mesmerized by them. This is something very, very important. No, don't run away from it. Look at their beauty, look at their contributions to maintain the biodiversity, and as a respect towards these things, just get mesmerized by them. This is what is the problem. No, I think we should have an ecological life. The moment I say ecological life, I should be a part of biodiversity. I should consider myself like an ant, like a virus, like a bacteria. No, human is nothing more than that. Don't consider ourselves as top of the biodiversity. If you are at the top, you are going to go. Why? Because this is the seed. No? See, nowadays what is happening, the nature, biodiversity, everything. I do appreciate. I do appreciate the efforts of each and every people here, and people outside who are doing this work. But best thing, people what they are doing to prove that I am great, they are trying to criticize the others. Don't do that. There is no need of criticizing people for your personal glory. Don't do that. That is not a good thing. Appreciate everybody's efforts. Everybody, starting from a bird watcher to a bird researcher, everybody has a same goal of conservation. If that is the goal, then just that. And at the end of the day, if you ask me what is conservation, I'll say that there's nothing called conservation. I hate the word conservation. Conservation is a human-centric approach to save a species which is responsible for the bad things in biodiversity. Look at the root cause of all the problems in biodiversity. We are there. Humans are there. We are at the root cause of it. So I think conservation is okay, but don't deal with that. Not in that sense. What I'm saying is do it properly, do it from your heart. Do conservation is needed only for the conservation of human race. Okay. Look at this. This is a picture which tells the story. These brown dots here are the events called mass extinction. In the history of Earth, 5 times mass extinction happened. The latest was dinosaurs. And today we are in the midst of 6th mass extinction. Okay, we should be worried about it. Why? Because in the last 5 mass extinctions, the species which were dominated got wiped off. The species which was doing great at that particular point of time got vanished. Think of the species is doing well now. Believe me, that species is going to go. And before I conclude, I would like to give a thought. Last 2 to 3 months, we realized that there is something called COVID-19, a virus, which is going to kill the humans. That's why we got confined to our houses. The moment we got confined to our houses, when the Homo sapiens got confined to their house, biodiversity started doing well. Means we don't need in biodiversity. This is the first and the best signal of humans are not needed in biodiversity. If this is true, then we have to change our attitude towards the biodiversity, start respecting nature. Don't do it, one day there will be the. Thank you very much. I'm thankful to Greenworks Trust for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you, Tushar Abhankar sir, for inviting me to interact with learned people here. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone here. I hope you must have got mesmerized by evidence of reptiles. Thank you. So this is my email ID. You can contact me on bharatgiri@gmail.com. Yeah, this is my phone number. One of the phone number which you can use it for calling. My number, I think WhatsApp. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bharat Giri, for such a fantastic and eye-opening session on amphibians and reptiles. I now request participants, if they have any question regarding this session or the reptiles and amphibians, they can write down in the chat box and we will take them one by one. Sir, there are a few questions in the chat box. Can we take them?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Uh,
And a sincere request, Sarvesh sir. If you
yes.
call me sir, I'm going to leave the meeting immediately.
Sorry. So yeah, we'll take the questions. Sachi Pandey is asking, for someone who is not a professional, how to document the unidentified species we see around us? Is there any format?
I think there are many citizen science websites where you can start uploading your observations. One of them is India Biodiversity Portal. Okay, and there are many portals like that where you can upload your observations, and they don't ask for your scientific background. And if you don't identify it also, you just upload your observation there. There are people who will identify it for you.
Okay. Then Saswat Tripathi is asking how to start an ecological study of amphibians in an ecosystem, how to get baseline ecological information about them.
See, ecological information means how do they behave in nature. Now, how do they behave in ecosystem? How do they behave in ecology? Like what they are doing there. Okay. So, unfortunately, we don't know anything about the known amphibians. You start with anything. You start, if you want to look at their breeding behavior, start when do they breed, when the breeding starts, you know, when mating happens, how many eggs they lay, what happens to their eggs, how much time it takes to, for the tadpoles to grow or eggs to hatch into tadpoles, all those things, everything, anything. You just start, and I think many things will come
Okay, then we have a question from Anjali Maurya. How can we get to know about what species are already known or described and which are yet to discover?
which are yet to discover is very difficult, but which are known to science. I think there are many portals. Like one of the best portal is EMBL Reptile Database. If you go there, I think there are. I think that is one of the very well updated database where you can look at which are the reptiles known from the world. I think you need to look at the reptiles from India in that checklist. And there are many checklists which are published. I think we are coming up with a website now, and in that website we are making an effort to put up the checklist of Indian reptiles and amphibians, the updated checklist of Indian amphibians and reptiles, and that will tell you that this is what is known in India. Okay, what not known in India, nobody. I think we have to make an effort to do that, and I'm sure if you wish, you can.
Okay. Then we have a question from Hemalata Sagre. Hi, you said awareness is very important. You also mentioned flashing on frogs disturbs them. Nature trail surely helps in awareness. How do you think nature trails of frog watch can be undertaken sensibly?
Hemalata is a very good question. Okay, go to Ambuli and see the amount of nature love we throw a frog and snakes there. So my problem is mistreating those animals, not with going and flashing the torch. No, if you're flashing the torch, and talking about it, there may not be a big problem. I'm sure there is a problem. No, see, tourism is really bringing in good things, but is it really helping that animal by any way? We need to think about it. No, it is helping the local communities. I really agree. See, Amboli, we need to encourage ecotourism there. No? Because tourism is the biggest source of income for the community there. In Amboli, I surely feel that we have to do it. Without tourism, Amboli will not. No, without tourism, Amboli will have trouble. No? To avoid that, why don't we do a sensible tourism? So why not to go there, see the frog? One person will fire the torch to group leader and let him explain that. You observe that and come back. You want to see the photograph. There are ample amount of. Why everybody want to photograph a frog sitting there and giving the call? You have to feel that. See, imagine. No, please don't take me wrongly. No, that frog is trying to, build its generation. He's putting in efforts to get the female so that he can breed and do good for the future generations. No, if I'm stopping that at that particular point of time. No, similarly, these phantom-red lizards. No, so I raised the voice against that. No, there was a male sitting and 100 people surrounding that and taking photographs. I said, why we are doing this? No, we want photograph. This is nature awareness. 100 people went there and running around with a male who was trying to find a female. And people said, no, you are against this and that. I said, man, imagine, no, you are having some intimate things like this with your wife and somebody's photographing you, how will you feel? Don't you feel that that is wrong? That is really wrong. No, it's not. See, we should respect. We should stop at some particular point of time. We should not be doing certain things, which can harm the processes which are happening in nature. I think frog watch, is that really bringing a positive attitude towards people? How many people really go to Amboli only to watch frogs? Tell me. Many people go to Amboli only to, they have to go there to photograph, no doubt, but at what cost? That's something really very important. I think we have to change our attitude towards these animals. The people who organizes these tours, I feel that there are many people who really don't know how to organize them. There are many people who do these tours for earning the money. So if you have the attitude of earning the money, then forget about conservation. You just tell the people that I'm here to earn money. I'm taking you for this. You do whatever you want. The same people come back and talk about conservation. No, I did that mistake. I'm telling you, I did that mistake, but today I'm not doing it. I also take trips there. I also take people there. But if I see a wine snake or if I see a Malabar pit viper, I tell people that it is there. Take one photograph and come. Or don't take the photo. No need. People listen to me. They agree that this is not to be done. Prove them that this is not the right way. Tell them properly. I think people will listen. Many people will not come to your trip, but those who will come to your trip will continue coming with you. I think that's what I will do.
Yeah, that's a great answer, sir. Then Rupsana Pradhan is asking, lately I have seen the Indian tree frog changing its color from light tone during day to dark tone towards evening. What is this behavior?
There is a paper recently published, and people have also observed that there are, this the Rhacoporus lateralis. There is a frog in Western Ghats, endemic to the Western Ghats, which is greenish in color. And many times we saw some brown colored frogs as well. So I always had a question like, why this coloration? So one of my people, I think I do these courses as well. So one of my course participants told me that, Bharat, I've seen some interesting things. I asked him why. What, tell me. He said, when I saw that frog first time, I clicked it, it was green in color, and slowly it started changing color. So it is a stress-induced color change. Green to become brown. So whenever you see a Rhacoporus lateralis in brown color, it is stress. Okay. Now, why this common tree frog? Again, probably in the day they are resting somewhere, and that color is is okay for them to get camouflage there. When they come out in the night, probably they use the color. See, color in frogs is mostly for camouflage. And frogs, tree frogs do change. I'm really happy that you observed it. I'm really happy. I appreciate your. But and at the end of the day, I'm sure you will not read it in any publications because it has not been mentioned. Nobody wrote about it. What is the opportunity for you now to write about? Don't you feel that this is an opportunity to write about the common tree frog which changes the color? Please. It's not a joke. I'm telling you the fact. Please write about it.
Okay. Then we have a question from Aditya Lad. How to identify frogs? Should we look over the colors or there are any specific features to look for?
Aditya, for identification, what are the features we use? We use the features which are consistent. We use the features which doesn't change. Which are those features? In frogs, you need to check. Naturally, color is not a feature. Just now we saw that the tree frog changes the color. But the dilations on their fingertips, the fold of skin above the tympanum, the hand size and length of the hind limb, everything doesn't change. It remains the same. Probably the characters which remain the same should be taken for identification, not the colors. Color is not a character to identify amphibians and reptiles. Experts are doing it. I'm not an expert. But as a person who does the description of many species, tell you that color is not a character.
Okay. Then Rupak Yadwad is asking, many people in India think that amphibians and snakes are very fatal and dirty animals. Like if they see frog, they feel like vomiting. So what's your opinion to stop them and help them to let them observe the beauty?
So Rupak, I think all the amphibians and reptiles feel the same when they see the humans. So when they see the humans, I think they must be feeling like UK because they hate us like anything. And they have the reason to do so because we finished their presence. Okay, my second question. Do they harm us in any way? Are they coming and disturbing us in any way? Is a frog dangerous to us? Is a frog poisonous to us? Is a lizard poisonous to us? All wrong things. Because of the wrong thing, people hate them. No? So it's our job to talk good about them. It's our job to tell good about them. I think, no, see now, today, uh, quite a lot of people came for this talk. Although it was for on amphibians and reptiles. No, it was not because of Bharatgiri, it was because of amphibians and reptiles. Means there are people who want to know more about them. See, somebody did these efforts for birds as well in the past. Means there are so many books written on birds, so many good stories written on birds. I think, see, if you decide, I'll tell you, I'll give you one assignment. Every week, no, on your Facebook or Instagram handle, if you have, start posting a good story about a frog. Start posting a good story about a snake. Start posting a good story about lizard on your handle. Forget about how many people like it. Just continue your efforts. One day somebody will follow you and they will change their attitude towards you. First, if you start with yourself, I think many people will change.
That was a great suggestion. Many people will follow, I'm sure. Then we have a question from Nayan Jain. If possible, can you please briefly explain the long process of describing a species?
Briefly, if that would have been brief, I would not have been sitting here. It's not brief. Basically, what happens? First you get certain things in your hand. Suppose this is a mouse. No? I know that this is a mouse. We know what does that mean, basically. What I will do, I look at certain characters here. Then I will look at the company, I will look at the make, I will look at this thing. And then suddenly I realize, oh, this is something different. When I say this is something different, means I have the understanding of other mouse as well. Okay? Means I have read about them. The moment I know that, oh, this is something different, means I have that understanding. And similar thing happens for new species as well. The moment you see something, you realize, oh, this is something cool. This I haven't seen this before. The moment you do that, you start doing the comparison. Then what you will do, you will have the character set of the species which are known to science to that particular point of time. And then you will start doing the comparison. Then during that comparison, you will come to know that, oh, this character is different, this character is different. There are 3 different characters and the known species. And those are used for description. Once you have that, you write a paper. The moment you write a paper, you have to submit that to a journal. So prior to that, you have to submit those specimens to a museum. You get a number from the museum. Okay, and then the paper goes to the reviewers. Reviewers have a look at it. People who are expert in that group, they look at your paper and then they give their comments on that. And if it is a valid species, it gets published. I hope I explained it.
Yes, very clearly. So we'll take last 2 questions because we have some time limit. So we'll take first question by Karthik Srivastava. Sir, in reference to Rupsana's questions that frog coloration looks different during daytime and evening time is because of iridescence as what happens in birds that they look of different shade during whole day because of light scattering, or it is not like that?
See, Srivastava, in birds, many birds know that reflectance is means that is not a true color. Basically, it's an artificial artifact of color, reflection and reflectance of light, and what we see is not real. But in frogs, the color is pigmented. It's a pigment color, basically. So that is nothing to do with light or reflection or reflectance. It is the real color. Okay, and that is again changes. There are certain things which are responsible for that, which are under the skin, and they are helping frogs to get that, not the light which is falling. So again, if it is under stress or if it is under certain conditions, they do change their color. That is like that, not because of the light or this.
Okay, and we'll take the last question from Ashwit. He is asking, is there any chance to work with you?
Work with me for what? I am jobless. I don't have a job. No, I'm an unemployed old man here. But I think why do you want to work with me? Work for nature because I work for nature because no, I work for amphibians and reptiles. I work for understanding them. You start your own work, Ashwin. I think and any help you need to do that work, just let me know. I'll be more than happy to accept it.
Okay. So thank
And
you very
at
much.
this stage, I don't have at this stage I don't have any projects to where I can.
Okay. So thank you very much, Bharat, for sharing this
Thank you.
valuable information about amphibians and reptiles. I thank you on behalf of Greenworks Trust for this lovely session. I hope everyone must have enjoyed the session and the question answer part after that. We wish to bring more such informative sessions for you with various topics. So I hereby request everyone to make a small donation to our organization and support our nature education and awareness initiative. No amount is small for us, so please give the help hand. I will share the bank details on our group. Once again, thank you everyone for joining the session and thank you, Bharat, for giving the time for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day, all.